Hello and welcome to another Roblox tutorial. This is a second video of creating a keycard tween service door in Roblox Studio, and in this video we will be animating and programming our door. So as you remember, in the last video we tagged our door and got it ready for scripting. By the way, if you haven't watched that, I will link it right now. And so now we have to script it. So let's go into server script service and create a normal script. I'm going to name this script door handler. And so there's a few basic things you have to define in your script. So the first thing we want is the collection service, and this is responsible for getting all of our tagged objects. So we're going to use game get service collection service. This just gets the collection service. So this will allow us to get all of our tagged doors. So now we're going to make a doors list that utilizes a function from the collection service, which is get tagged. And notice if I go find my tag editor real quick, one sec. Here we have our tag window. We named our tag door. So when we're getting the tagged objects, we'll get door. And this function, collection service get tags, returns a list of all of the instances tagged with the tag name. So if I go into my door right here and I go to tagged instances, you see doors right here. So if we do get tagged, it should return this single door. If there's more doors, it will return it. And keep in mind, even if there's only one door, it'll still return a list, or table, I guess I should say, of items. So we have the collection service, we have the doors. So the first thing we want to do is run through our doors. So I'm going to do for I, door in pairs, doors, do, and then let's just print our door.name for now. This is just to test, see everything's working. So let's play this. And as you can see, it prints door because we have a single door that is named door. So the next thing we have to do is actually add functionality to our door. So the way I'm going to do that is go make a module script in server script service, and I'm going to name this module script the door module. I'm just going to zoom in. So first thing I'm going to do is change the default module name to door. This is just to prevent confusion because we know this is a door module, so it should have a door. And then next thing I'm going to do is assign the index meta method of our door to itself. Now, if you don't know what any of this means, I have a tutorial on object-oriented programming in Roblox. It's a series. I will link that right now so you can understand what all these meta methods and different things are. I will be using a object-oriented programming approach here just because this allows our doors to be the most expandable as possible. So now that we have set the door to itself, so any child tables, when they try to index something I don't have, it will go to the door because that's what we want. We're going to make a variable called door.close and set this to false initially. And we're also going to make another variable, which is going to be the door.close time, and we're going to set that to 1. So this is just the time it'll take for the door to open and close. And the first function that we want to make in our script is door new. So this is going to take in a parameter model. And what this function is going to do is create a new table and set the meta table of that table to our main door module. And this again has to do with object-oriented programming. So we have our new door. We're going to name this variable new door, and it's going to be the child table of self. So the reason we're using self here is because we have a colon right here, and this says, hey, whoever's calling this function, we have to send in that table. So most of the time, we'll just be using this table right here is going to be calling this function. And so now that we have a new door, we first want to set the index meta method to itself. This is just good practice. You always want to do this in case you make other nested like child doors inside of it. And we also want to set the new door.model to the model parameter we take. And this is just for later when we tween things, do stuff like that. And then we want to return the new door. And so this will be used when we need to create new doors. And the next function we want to define is the function to create our tweens. So when we are opening and closing our door, we want to animate it. And the best way to animate our door is using the tween service. So what we want to do is, first of all, go above the door table and define the tween service, because this is just something that we'll need. Game get service, tween service. So now we have our tween service, we can start tweening. So the main function you'll use with the tween service is tween create. So we're going to define our tween, and we're going to do tween service create. And I'm going to space this out a little bit so it's easier to see. Now this takes a few parameters. The first one is the object we want to tween. So in our case, it is the self.model.door. So remember, when we create a new door, we will send in the door model, and the door model has a door, and we want to tween that. So we have the self.model.door, make sure to put a comma, and then this is where you can customize it. This is the tween info, and we need to make a new tween info, and this takes in a few variables. First one is the time it takes, and what we're going to do is we're going to use the close time variable that we defined earlier. This is just good practice because you don't want to be searching through your scripts to figure out what numbers you have to change to make it slower or faster. You just want this close time right here so you can do quick fixes like pretty quickly. And so we have the close time there. And the next variable that this takes in is the easing style. So I'm going to use enum.easingstyle.sign because that looks pretty cool. Easing direction. The easing direction doesn't really matter most of the time, so we're just going to do easing direction.in because that's the default. And there's three more variables: the repeat count, if it reverses, and the delay time. I'm not going to touch those because all of the defaults are like 0, false 0, and we don't really need to change that since tweening our door is only going to be one action. So now we're going to go back down. And so now what we have to do right now is in the parentheses of our function, we have to add a parameter, which is going to be the properties table. Now, whenever we send this table in, it will contain a property that we want to change of the object getting tween. So if this properties table contains a position variable, which is what we'll usually use, this tween will take the door and tween its position variable with this tween info. And so yeah, that's what this function does. And after this, we want to return our tween. So that is our create tween function done. Now the next function we want to do, this is the final function in our door module. We want to do a function door toggle state. This is basically the open/close function. We don't need a function for each of them since they're basically doing the same thing, except one is going to the open position and one is going to the close position. So first thing we're going to do in this function is set self.closed equal to not self.closed. Now what this is going to do is it's going to negate self.closed, which basically means if self.closed is true, it will equal not self.closed, which is false. And if self.closed is false, it will equal not self.closed, which is true. So it'll just toggle it between false and true. And this is what we want when we are toggling the state of our door between open and closed, obviously. So the next thing we're going to do is pretty special. You could use a if statement to do if self.close or if not self.close to change the properties, because remember, we want to change our properties of our door between like the open position and closed position. But I'm going to use a dictionary to do this instead. This is just a lot easier. It makes more sense to me, to be honest, and it just frees up on code space because you don't need a waste if statement. So what we're gonna do is set the index true to the properties table. We're gonna set this equal to self.model.reference dot open, or actually dot closed dot position. And so this is going to be the properties of our tween when it is going to close. But first, before we go on the next thing, we actually have to do position equals self.model.referencePoints.close.position. And so what this is saying is we have the position. We're trying to change the position property. So the position equals this. And when we send this into our tween function, it will create a tween based on this new position that we want to change it to. And then so we also have to do this for the false side. So this will be when we want to open the door. So we're going to set the position equal to self.model.referencePoints.open.position. And if you remember in the last video, we did set the reference points. We set the close and open little parts to their respective positions. So that's where we are getting this from. And so now that we have defined our properties table, what we need to do is create our tween. So local tween equals self create tween. Because we already have a tween function, we're going to send the properties self.closed. So what this is going to do is when we toggle the state, we negate self.closed, we reverse it basically, and we just define this. We just have to define this every time since we're using self. And then we take in true, either true or false, depending on what self.closed is. So if self.closed is true, we will, if it's true after this, we will send in the closed position. If it's false after this little statement right here, we will send in the open position, so it will tween it accordingly. And the last and final thing we want to do is play the tween. So there we go. Now we have our door module set up. So now that we have completed our door module, let's go back to the door handler and give our doors actual like functionality. So the first thing we want to do is get that door module that we just made. So I'm going to do local door module equals require. The reason we are using this require function is because the door module is a module script, and in order to access all of its functions and stuff, you have to use require, because otherwise Roblox will think you're just referring to a normal like instance. So we're going to do require script.parent.door module. So now that we have the door module, let's give each door model in the doors table that we defined with the tags. We're going to give each of them a special table, which is going to be our new door, which it's going to be the door module new, and we're going to send in the model. So this goes in, or the model is the door. My bad. Here we have the door. So as you recall, this new function takes in the model, which we are sending back here, and it returns a list, which is the child table of the store module. So this new door is a list, and first thing we want to do with this new door function, or not function, a table list, I alternate between the two. They are basically synonymous. We want to toggle the state of our door. So what this toggle state is going to do is, since our doors by default are not closed, door.close is set to false, it will set door.close to true and close our doors. It's just close all the doors on our game. Make sure they're not in the wrong spot, like when you're moving them around, whatever. So now that we've closed our door, if we run this, nothing much will happen because of course the doors are already closed, and so that function doesn't really do much. What we're going to do next, just to demonstrate that this little door system works, is let's wait like 5 seconds, let's say, and let's toggle the state of the new door again. So this should close the door, wait 5 seconds, and then open the door. So let's try this. So if we wait a little bit, so sorry, slight typo there. I said toggle start instead of toggle state. So make sure whenever you're dealing with these tables that your functions are exactly the same as you define them, because there is no autocomplete sadly with these. So yep, that was a slight mistake on my part. Now, if you run this, it should work. So let's give it some time, and look at that, the door opens. So you can do this as many times as you want, just to give you some more demonstrations. You can like wait a second, then do new door, toggle state again. So open, wait a second, and then close. And you get the idea. So this is really cool. You can customize everything about how it opens, like what it does. And also what's cool about it is if the door is opening and then it like there's a tween that makes it close, it'll stop the opening sequence and close it. So you can sort of spam it without having a like problem. So that's pretty good. Everything works perfectly fine with this door. So that's basically it for this episode of the series of making our door. In the next video, we're actually going to add a keycard tool, which will allow the player with this keycard tool to open and close the doors. And we're going to make this able to work with multiple doors in our game because one door is completely worthless. So I hope you enjoyed. Make sure to like and subscribe. If you have any questions or comments, this is pretty advanced stuff, I would say, but it will make your code structure a lot simpler in the end, even though we're using module scripts and like meta tables and stuff. It'll just make it a lot simpler, a lot easier to expand. But yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you have a nice day, and goodbye.